All right, thank you, Carolyn. Welcome, everybody. It is my great pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Lisa Parks Boush, who is the Director for the Center of Integrative Geosciences at the University of Connecticut. Prior to her arrival at the University of Connecticut, she was a longtime faculty member at the University of Akron, and then also spent some time at the National Science Foundation as a program officer in the Sedimentary Geology and Paleobiology program. Her research interests include a reconstruction of past climate histories as they are recorded in lakes, and she has traveled the world studying these lake systems. So without further ado, take it away, Lisa.
Okay. Thank you, Pranoti, and thank you, Carolyn. And it is my great honor to be presenting today in this series. I have benefited tremendously from these sort of series, and I hope that the information that I can share with you today will help you make your department stronger in the future. I'm going to be talking about a external review that we did last year at the University of Connecticut, and it really was transformative, and I'll get to that in a minute, but it really made a huge difference in our program, as you will see. So I think that it's really important as leaders of departments that these processes of external reviews are taken with the greatest seriousness, and that you are successful in preparing for them. So first, a few questions you can just answer to yourself, but does your institution currently have an external review process? If so, do you know how frequently they occur? And have you recently completed one, or will you be doing one soon? And have you participated in any of the CERC programs that are offered through Carleton College? And then the last question I want you to ask yourselves is, what's your relationship with your dean and your provost? Because oftentimes these external reviews the information goes directly to them, and they use the information to allocate resources to your department, perhaps, or re-strategize maybe your department with you. So it's really important that you know a little bit about your dean and your provost and what their priorities are, so that you can align what you're going to be doing in your external review with their priorities and their thought processes. So I want to start today by giving you the Yukon story. It's actually a happy story with a happy ending, as you'll see, but it actually started out not so great. So in 2003, there was an external review of the Department of Geology and Geophysics here at the University of Connecticut. And the review was, it was a comprehensive external review, and it was not a positive review. It had a lot of problems that it identified. There was under-enrollment, there were curriculum issues, and the issue that actually led to the department dissolution was that the faculty and the head at the time did not act upon the review in a positive way. And so that's why I say you really need to know your dean well, your provost well, because ultimately for us, what happened was the dean and the provost dissolved the Department of Geology and Geophysics. And there was a lot of uproar in the community at large. There were over 3,000 letters written to no effect. And so they dissolved the department and created this thing called the Center for Integrative Geosciences. And we had tenure lines across 7 departments in 3 colleges. And then they had a center director, which is my position, that was from outside of the original department. And so this carried on for about 10 years, and I was hired in 2014 as the new director with no promises given. So immediately what we did when I got here was we did a SWOT analysis, which is looking at strategic things in your department, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats. And we created a plan to basically try to get the department back. And since that time, we added 3 tenure track faculty and 3 full-time lecturers. And we had a roadmap, and you can see it on the right-hand side of the slide, of all the things we did to get the department back. And it was really, truly a Herculean effort. It was like Sisyphus, pushing the boulder up the hill. But what we ended up doing was we put forward a proposal that then led to our external review, which was done last April. And then the recommendations for the external review was for us to form a new department, which was, I'm happy to say, on January 30th of 2019 was approved by the Board of Trustees, and we will be a new department as of July 1 of this year. So this is what we learned in this process, and I think this can be useful when you think about your own department. So we had that wheel there is where all of our faculty were. We had geography, tenure lines, marine sciences, physics, chemistry, ecology and evolutionary biology, civil engineering, natural resources. And so we had to pull all these faculty together, which we did, and we pulled them all back into a whole, except for 3 lines that are now will be in. There'll be 1 shared line in physics, 1 shared line in marine sciences, and 1 shared line in natural resources. So we basically put the department back together. So we'll have a new department, 14 tenure track lines, 3 geoscience and 3 in other departments, and 3 full-time lecturers. So I'm hoping that this will help also to have you guys think about your own reviews, but things that you should be thinking about as in your leadership role as department head is the idea of this SWOT analysis, a strategic plan, and you really need to know your departments well. And going into the process of an external review, you need to know what your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats are, so that you can articulate them to the external review committee and then also to your dean, your provost, and other decision makers. But what we also did in this process is we transformed our work environment, and we renovated a lot of infrastructure. We recruited great faculty. We really worked hard on getting external funding. So we have 2 career awardees. We have an 85% NSF success rate. We've got great publications, Science, Nature, PNAS. And we also did a lot for internal and external publicity on campus and externally in the community. And then we did a lot of different events to promote morale. We created a student research symposium. We have, Donut Thursday, just to, promote conversation amongst the faculty and students. And then the leadership style that we've embraced here is one of collaboration. So a lot of open communication and transparency. And then we also established an advisory board and tried to reconnect with our alumni. So we identified these things as things that you should be doing anyway in a good department, and then we tried to highlight them in our external review. So as I said before, we were successful, and we feel truly that our external review was important part of this process. So we really, we had 3 great external reviewers that I'll talk about in a minute, and they helped us make the case for re-establishing our department. So I've kind of outlined here 8 steps that I think go into making us a successful external review, and we'll go through them in the next part of this presentation. So first of all, as with anything, you really need to know the why. You need to know why you're doing an external review. And it shouldn't just be because you're being told to do one. You should use the external review process, as I mentioned before, as a way to help you become a stronger department. And I think if you put that in the center of your why, you will have a greater chance of having a very successful review. So from an administrative viewpoint, we've talked about this already. They want to know an assessment of your performance of your department, an outside perspective from the community, with the mindset most administrators are thinking in terms of resource allocation. So this is your big opportunity to ask for additional resources if you need them, and I honestly don't know anybody that doesn't need additional resources. So from your own perspective, you can use this as a way to advocate for your department, as we mentioned, but also to get your faculty actually rallied around a set of new initiatives, perhaps a cause to have a successful review, and use it as an opportunity for goal setting and self-reflection. So I think that's really important. And I put Deming's, if you don't know Deming, he was the one that kind of put forward the idea back in the 50s even about continuous review, continuous improvement. And I think, if you have that mindset within your department as a leader, these external reviews should be really helpful for you to get kind of a positive outcome for your department. So, you plan, you do, you check, you act. And if you're always in the sort of this cycle of review, of self-review, self-reflection, this process of external review will go much more smoothly. So, it starts with fundamentals. If you go to the CERC website, they list very articulately what makes a strong department. You're dynamic, you're upwardly mobile, you manage change well, you have degrees that are highly valued, good departments are student-centered, good department heads and good department members know the rules, meaning they know what the priorities are on campus, and they align their priorities for the department with the priorities on campus. They're congenial and collaborative, and they have a diverse faculty with a good balance of skills. And this is where the self-reflection comes into play. How strong is your department? And if there are areas that you need to work on, then this is a good opportunity to identify those areas. And then, as I mentioned before, ask for the resources to improve. If you've got an issue with diverse faculty and you'd like to divert, and add faculty lines with more diverse members, this might be a great opportunity to identify this as a need. So another thing that strong departments do is they have a unifying vision and shared goals. I think that this is critical to have people come together and articulate you know, what it is that the department brands itself as. What are the goals of the department? What is the vision of the department? I think that part of that is also kind of how do you justify your existence on campus? How do you align yourself or compare yourself with other departments on campus? Do you know the accomplishments of your own faculty and staff? Do you know the accomplishments of your own alumni? How does your program contribute to the campus, to the state, to your region? And who are your supporters within the campus community, but also at the state level? So you need to arm yourself with data, data that show basically how good you are and how essential you are to the overall objectives of the university. And so your external review should build on all of this and highlight these strengths. So step one is, I always tell people to back engineer or reverse engineer the equation. Figure out what kind of conclusions you want the external review committee to come up with. What are the key outcomes that you want them to settle upon after examining your department, and back engineer those into the actual document and review process. And to do that, you need to also encapsulate the goals of the campus, of leadership. You need to know what the priorities are so you can figure out how your outcomes will mesh or match with the outcomes that would be most supported at the higher levels. We obtained copies of recent external reviews from other departments. This was very helpful because then we could see, we looked at physics and we looked at ecology and evolutionary biology. So we could kind of see how they did it. Each department does things extremely differently, at least on our campus, even though they're driven by the same review questions. But we kind of pulled from, various places how they presented their data and how they aligned, their priorities and so forth. As with any big project, you need to set a timeline for how you're going to get this document written and pulled together. And then we also obviously use resources like AGI and CERC to figure out kind of what makes a good review for a geoscience department. So, do your homework and start this process extremely early. Know that this takes months to do, which is really critical to know. It's kind of like writing a huge collaborative proposal, for example. There's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of detail, and you need to develop a good team. If you have a large department, you don't have to use the entire department. You can divide things up into small teams to do certain parts of it. If you have a smaller department, we used committee of the whole. But we also had sub teams that worked on different sections of the document. So we divided things up into sort of these digestible pieces. And the biggest part that we were told, and I will also agree with, is the data gathering piece takes the most time. So when you are gathering data, and also in our perspective, a lot of the data that was provided to us by the university was incorrect. And that's because we are from 7 different departments and 3 colleges. So our data gathering process was extremely tedious. But we went in and actually dove in and got our own data on, student classroom hours, credit hours, grants, all the big pieces. We actually double checked our numbers to make sure that they were reported accurately. And we actually identified the discrepancy between what was reported from the university, which is versus our own numbers, so that people could actually see that, for a while we were being underreported at the university level. We designated a compiler, somebody who would check not just for consistency, but also proofread the entire document as a whole so that it read well, because the people who are going to be reading this, the external review committee, they don't want to read something that's all chopped up and kind of smashed together. They want to read a nice articulated, well-articulated document. And then, of course, we used Google Drive. You can also use Dropbox, or the equivalent to consolidate all of our materials. I mentioned before, this takes a lot of time. So my advice to anyone undergoing this procedure is to start early and to realize it's going to take a long time. And also, you're going to have to put together some milestones and benchmarks to make sure that you're on time. Any type of project that is more than a few months or weeks, needs to have internal deadlines. So you need to set those. And then also, frankly, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. My own sacrifice was I did not go out in the field last January because I was, pushing this through to the end. That was okay with me. I postponed the field work, but you realize that there might have to be some sacrifices made by some folks to make sure that this is done correctly. Because I think, too, having done some of these on the other side, being a reviewer, is the review committee needs the documents, and I would not be late with the documents. So being on time is important, I think. Step 4, use your data wisely. So we use metrics from other institutions, for example, peer and aspirant institutions, so that we could show UConn and how we measured up to our other sister institutions. So that was really important. All of our graphics went up. There was one that had the slight dip, and that was because it was 2018 data and it wasn't fully compiled yet. So I would always advocate some way to tell a positive story. You really want to show accurate numbers, but you also want to make sure that you're telling as positive stories as possible. We also did a lot with appendices. The original document, the text of the document, which does have figures in it, was 25 pages. And then we had about 250 pages of full documents and appendices, which included all of our faculty's CVs. So I know some people do bio sketches instead, so there are not so many of them. But frankly, I really wanted to include our full CVs of our faculty, because I really felt that it was important for the review committee and also the administration to see how good our faculty were. Step 5, this is kind of the writing part of it. We put together an executive summary. Obviously, that's the thing that gets read first, so it has to be absolutely perfect in terms of what it says. It definitely sets the tone. of the document. We did a unit description with our mission, goals, recent history. We talked about our scholarly productivity, our undergraduate and graduate programs, our student outcome assessments, our outreach and public service, how we collaborate with other units, and then our facilities, and then conclusions and future directions. So that was basically how we put our product together. There was a little wiggle room in some of this. They did give us guidelines, but this is how we put it together so that we were putting our best face forward. Then we put together these appendices, and we put in baseline data, an org chart of how we're organized, summary data for peer and aspirant. They didn't ask for that, but we gave it to them. Summary data for our faculty scholarship, research funding, our courses. They did ask for the courses, course enrollment, grad courses, graduate awards and survey data. They did not ask for that. We gave it to them anyway. Our graduate application data, that's another one we added in on our own accord. Employer information was very detailed. Our current graduate placement, also extremely detailed. Our major awards, publications. We have a research symposium called Geosciences Day. We added that, and also our seminar series. So some of these appendices were not asked for, but we decided to put them in there because we felt that told our story the best way. The next step is to choose your external reviewers, and we did this with respect to diversity of institution, also demographics and expertise, and also always remembering who our audience was. So we got somebody from USC, just so happens our president got her PhD at USC. We got somebody from UMass Amherst, that's our sister institution, that was really critical. And then another person that came from SUNY Stony Brook, also a peer institution, but that was where our dean got her PhD, so that they were familiar with the institutions from some of these reviewers. I think that timing is always critical in anything that you do in life. So timing is also important of when to have your review. You really have to have all the people there that you need to have there. So you have to make sure you're on the dean's schedule, the provost schedule, so they can meet with the external review committee. So that's important. In terms of the event itself, this is a bit of a orchestration, right? So you have to have appropriate arrivals of the review committee. We had somebody get stuck on the West Coast from a storm. You have to build that into your possibilities of things that are going to happen. We arranged pickup for the committee. We were 35 minutes from the airport, but we didn't want anybody to be Ubering in or taking a limo in. So we made sure that we actually had extra time with the committee member by going to the airport ourselves and picking them up. We allow the committee to meet one another before, the evening before. I think that's really important. On a recent review I was on, I was staying at the same hotel as some of these other committee members. I didn't know who they were. It would have been really helpful, if we could have had dinner the night before so we got to know each other. So I think that's important. Make sure that you as the department head meets them early in the review. Like the very first thing that they do officially is to meet with you, and so that you can set the stage and the agenda. And then you have to be careful on how you're going to divvy up their time. Who's going to get FaceTime? Are you going to do groups of people meeting with them? Who's going to be in the group? Are you going to be mixing ranks? So that is kind of dicey because, you know, you don't want your junior faculty necessarily feel intimidated or uncomfortable by speaking freely if senior faculty are in the room. So you have to be cognizant of that. So you have to kind of make sure that they get a full, you know, picture of what your department is all about. And so, you know, we had a pizza party where it was just our review committee and our undergrads, for example, and they had a very good exchange with them. So think about who's going to meet this committee and, you know, what is the message that's going to be put forward. Use your meals wisely and orchestrate your lab tours. And we even timed it, so we walked through our lab tours and made sure that there was going to be adequate time to get from one lab to the other because some of them are in different buildings. It happened to be raining torrentially the day of our review, the 2 days of our review. Yeah, make sure you have umbrellas or you have a way to pick people up to move them from one place to another so they're not getting soaking wet, for example. Make sure, I think also really critically is that the committee has time to work on their initial draft of their report. Because remember, it's not just coming to campus that's the important thing. What's important is what they're going to write in their report. And so I think that allowing them to have several hours to work together in a room alone on writing the report and getting everything organized for the report is really important for a good outcome. In that same vein, make expectations very clear to the committee in terms of what you want and when you want it. I know some external review committees, they're not really given a schedule time of when they need to get the report done. And so, you know, you could be waiting on the report for months, and that's not effective. So, you know, give them a couple weeks maybe, but make sure that that report gets done and gets done in a timely way, and it's an effective report that can be used for your benefit of your department. And I should mention too is what we did too to kind of streamline everything is we had a faculty meeting before the review, and we decided on some key messages that were in our document that we wanted to make sure that we, you know, made clear to the external review committee. So we obviously didn't tell people what to say, but we agreed as a group kind of what our basic message was going to be so that we were all kind of giving the same sort of impression, because for us, our stakes were extremely high because this was our one chance to get our department back. So this is just a copy of our schedule. I can send this to anybody that can't read it, but we had things in chunks, but also, as I mentioned before, allow travel time so that people aren't sprinting from one thing to another, and also allow time for some schedule flexibility in case there's some kind of glitch. In terms of designing the review and preparing for the event, we went through our entire building and did a spruce up. We got rid of surplus items in the hall. We made sure all of our students had posters, posters they might have presented at a meeting like AGU or GSA. Put those up on the bulletin boards. We made a big display of field space pictures above our doors. We organized our mineral cases and had somebody actually dust them. Very detail specific. And we made sure that we had all the different tours organized and with lists of people's phone numbers and who to contact, who was in charge, so that it was all very well organized, because that's really critical, because you're only there for a few days for the external review team. And then I sent around all the reviewers' bios and their departmental profile. So when our faculty were talking to them, they knew a lot about the reviewers themselves, so that they could have an effective conversation with them about, what USC is about, what, UMass, so that they knew who these people were. Not everybody does that. I would highly recommend that you do that. And then we had letters of support from the community and advisory board that we helped share with the review committee. Then afterwards, after the review, make a meeting with your provost and your dean to discuss the results, which is really critical. And when you do meet with them, we had a response prepared already, but then the dean and the provost wanted some additional information. Always remember the audience that you're speaking to. And again, I can't emphasize enough, align your response to the strategic plan of the university. So I guess now what I wanted to do is talk a little bit then about your own situation. We can open this up to discussion in our time remaining here. Think for a minute what your own department's greatest strengths are, what your own department's greatest weaknesses are, what are some opportunities on campus or externally that your department could capitalize on in the future, and then what's your department's biggest threat. And if you haven't done a review recently and you're going to be doing one, can you think of what some goals are for your external review? Like, what is it? Is there one goal or several goals that you would like to see coming out of your external review? So maybe I'll open this up to conversation now, and you can ask questions, or we can talk about different aspects of this process.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. So we're going to open this up for Q&A, or if you have any comments on the questions that she just posed, you can either type in the conversation window. To open the conversation window, in the lower left-hand corner, there is an icon that looks like a message bubble. If you click on that, the conversation window will open. So if you are online, you can type in questions, or you can unmute yourself and ask your questions. If you are on the phone and would like to ask questions or consider these questions, I will unmute the phone and ask that you mute yourself and unmute yourself if you have any comments.
No questions?
Lisa, I have a question for you.
Sure.
What was really surprisingly challenging about this process?
I think just the sheer volume. So when you think about everything that a department does, this was the whole encompassing aspect. And I think that's the biggest thing that people are daunted. It's like, oh my God, I got to write the part, and they think of it as a chore. And that's why I started with the Deming process. In other words, your data acquisition and all these sort of compilations of stuff should be ongoing. And in fact, we're a year away, way out of this. But every year you update that data, those data profiles, so that it's not as daunting. And I think that's the thing that really just gets people intimidated maybe by this process, or just dreading it, like, oh God. But if this is an ongoing assessment process rather than every 5 years, and think too, if the average chair or head's term is 5 years or 4 years or however long you do it, you may or may not have the same person doing it. So, the idea of keeping legacy data and, institutional knowledge that gets transferred is really important. So I think that's more than anything. And then the review itself, you've got a day and a half. Like I said, we had torrential rain, and we had one of our reviewers get stuck on the West Coast. And so, there's all these logistic things that come up that you have to plan for. And you have to have, different scenarios you go through, like what if this happens, what if that happens? And that was probably a challenge as well. So I think those are the big things. And then a lot of people that I know that do these reviews have done these reviews recently, like in this last year, a couple departments on campus have been doing it, is just who's going to do the work. Who's going to write this thing? Like, who's going to step forward and put this thing together? A lot of times it falls on the chair or the head's shoulders, but if is there a way to make it a team effort? Helps a lot.
Excellent. Yeah. I was curious, what characteristics did you use to decide who your peer and aspirant institutions were?
That's a great question. So our university actually lists them, and they do change sometimes. So we actually went to the Office of Institutional Research here on campus and got that information. And so we chose the ones that had geology departments that were kind of similar to what we either aspired to or that we could compare ourselves to.
Okay. Excellent. And how did your review committee receive all of your extra documentation and appendices that they didn't actually request?
Right. Yeah. So I put together binders. So all the binders, I'm kind of a tactile person, but we did everything electronically, send it out to them. But when they arrived, we had binders with everything tabbed, cross-tabbed, so that people could find things easily. And I think that was really helpful for our perspective. And we had nice cover page, so it looked professional. And I think that can make a difference. I think to just show the level of readiness you have to do this sort of work.
Excellent. I think Pranoti, you have a question?
Yes. Hi. Actually, I got a bunch of questions here that came in an email, Lisa. So one question says, how did you protect your untenured faculty members while you were going through this review process? What jobs did they have, in the overall process?
That's a great question, because we did have I think we have 4 on tenured track, untenured faculty members. We gave them small tasks, but it was really important, since they are the future of the department, for them to have critical say, particularly in the future directions. So they were not writing the big chunks of the document, but they were definitely in the process of crafting the message and, you know, putting together the goals of the unit. So they were really important in terms of input, so that they felt like they're part of a process, but they were not necessarily assigned big time-consuming jobs for it. And I think that was really important, so that because I remember when I was my first year of my first job, I was the data compiler for a review, and so I mean it was a lot of work, and you know, I could have probably written a paper and a grant proposal during the same time period. I got to know the department well, but it wasn't really a good use of a junior faculty's time. So we're very cognizant of that. So yeah.
Great. Another question that came in was, you know, you alluded to your students being involved in the review process. Can you tell us a little bit about how you prepared them, or, you know, what you did with them? Did you meet with the group? Did you, what were the kinds of interactions they had with your external committee, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so we have a very strong relationship with our undergrad and graduate students, and we survey them every year, end of the year surveys, and but they don't know what this is. They don't know what an external review is and what it means. So I met with both groups. With the grad group, which meets weekly, I asked for some time with their group, and I went in and I explained like what this is, what's going to happen. You know, I showed them the document that we put together and all the pieces, and so that they understood the importance. I told them who they would be meeting, so they also knew who these people were that were coming in. And then I did the same thing with the undergrads, and I explained to them, you know, why, how, what's happening, who's coming. And then I also made sure each group, I said, look, we want you to be able to speak freely. You know, you're going to be meeting this team, this external review team, on your own. No one's going to be monitoring what you say. So feel free to say what's on your mind. That's what they want to hear. But I also did explain the context. You know, what these people are going to be doing with the information that you give them. And that was important for them to know. So I wasn't, you know, I wouldn't consider what I was doing coaching. I was basically giving them context so that they knew what was going on.
Nice. Now, one other question that came in was, you know, you alluded to the fact that the reviewers, you know, they needed time to write. So what was the format for this report that the reviewers had to write? Was it just a couple of questions and a thumbs up, thumbs down, or was it a long document that they had to produce?
I think their follow-up to us was it was less than 10 pages. There were specific questions that the provost office asked them. I had met with them. They knew what the stakes were ahead of time. I think what they did was they had sort of selected a chairperson that was going to coordinate everything, and then they divvied up the writing. We tried to pick people who had also done this before. 2 of the 3 people had done this before, and so that they kind of knew what these things looked like and how the process works, so that they had some knowledge coming into it. I think that's important. And I think I'm trying to recall, but I think they just followed the template that the provost office gave them. And then they added their own, like they did their own summary, their bullet points.
So what happens now? What will you be doing between, like, having gotten this approval till you actually are, named a department as of July 1? What are some of the things you're trying to do to get ready for this transition?
Well, it has been a long journey. So we had to renegotiate all the faculty's contracts in the fall. So we're reallocating IDC monies, and we're going through a rebranding exercise. I gave the grad students the task at the last AGU and GSA to go around and get swag from people. And so we're now having a sort of a swag competition, not competition, but like what do we order, water bottles or, whatever, photo scales. So we're updating our website, which takes more time than you think. Doing brochures. We're doing a large fundraising capital campaign. We're going through our curricula now. That we have all the lines pulled back, and we have control over our own curriculum now and our course scheduling, which we never really had before. So we're going through that internally and making some changes in our courses, course offerings. So we're really busy right now because we have about 6 months to get, everything laid out, and it's exciting. I mean, it's a lot more fun, and it's a lot, I would say, easier task because we know that it's what's at the end is a new department. And it's a strange thing because I've heard in the last 6 months, I guess, 3 departments, I won't name them, but that are in danger. So, the fact that they dissolved us, it still can happen to programs, and that's bad. That's bad for our science, and it's bad for, for so many reasons, but it's, I think it really is important to have these external reviews so that the administration can see how important geoscience is, or earth science, or whatever your department's called. In fact, I would say, if people are having issues communicating that to your dean, maybe you're getting a new dean, or maybe your old, just not seeing, you could maybe ask to move up your external review. The time, I know some departments that did that. Like they either delayed it or they moved it up so that they could get their case made front and center. So that, you can use these external reviews not as pain points, but as opportunities to make your message or strengthen your department, or advocate for your unit.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. And if we have no more questions coming in from the audience, I think we can move on.
I think that's it. Okay, I think that was the last slide. I think I just had, just a couple more things that you should realize. You should always have at the top of your fingertips, or, be able to articulate quickly why geoscience is important. And then, what are the 3 top geoscience issues in your state? Is it flooding? Is it coastal, or, coastal processes? Is it groundwater? What are the issues in your state? So when you talk to local people, you can articulate, why you're important. And in the case of AGI, they have wonderful sheets for every state, and so this is Connecticut, so they have Connecticut by the numbers. It talks about the workforce, it talks about water, natural hazards, energy, so some very important facts. You can download these, get these in front of your dean, to your provost, or whoever. Give this to your faculty so they know, because you're always making a case for yourself, and you always need to know what people are saying about you, both positively and negatively. So when you make a case for your own department, figure out what people are going to be saying about you. You know, oh, it's an old science, or oh, it's not relevant, or oh, it's just oil, or oh, you know, what are they saying about you? Figure out what that is, and then make a positive case for yourselves. And then just to sum up here, I think external reviews are really important, but I also think that you should be continuously assessing your department. I think you need to reverse engineer the process. You need to have control and know your own data. You have to start early, know your audience, distribute the work, make a timeline, and then as important is the follow-up. So you need to follow up with the review and get those recommendations, you know, as promissory notes from your administration for resources. And so I would say those were the most important thing. And then, of course, always a positive mental attitude.